Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamunatira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mishnapad Paramahansa Pradikacharya Ashtotartha Shri Srimad. His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pradikacharya Ashtotartha Shri Srimad. His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktavinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this first day of March 2023 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 13, Nature, the Enjoyer, and Consciousness. So, let's see. I think we're going to read the first verse again, and we can chant that one. Is that okay? And then I'll just read through the translation, and then we'll skip to the part of the purport we're in, because it's a long purport. Okay. Amanitvam. This is on page 537, text 8. All the other books are... You have a different book.
No, I thought I understood 13, like you said 8.
Text 8 of chapter 13. Amanitvam, adambitvam, ahimsa, chantararjavam, acharyopasanam, shaucham, staryam, atma, vinigraha. Amanitvam adambitvam, ahimsa chantararjavam, acharyopasanam shaucham, staryam atma vinigraha. Amanitvam adambitvam, ahimsa chantararjavam, acharyopasanam shaucham, staryam atma vinigraha. Amanitvam adambitvam, ahimsa chantararjavam, acharyopasanam shaucham, staryam atma vinigraha. Go ahead, Ross. Amanitvam adambitvam, ahimsa chantararjavam, acharyopasanam shaucham, staryam atma vinigraha. Amanitvam adambitvam, ahimsa chantararjavam, acharyopasanam shaucham, staryam atma vinigraha. Amanitvam adambitvam, ahimsa chantararjavam, acharyopasanam shaucham, staryam atma vinigraha. Do you want to try? Amanitvam adambitvam, ahimsa chantararjavam, acharyopasanam shaucham, staryam atma vinigraha. No? Okay. Amanitvam adambitvam. He's in Portugal. Arjavam. Acharyopasanam shaucham. Staryam atma vinigraham. Thank you, Vijay.
You're welcome, Prabhu.
Okay. So I'm just going to read the translation, a long translation, and then we'll skip to the part of the purport we're in. Translation. Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of the objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest, even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events, constant and unalloyed devotion to me, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment from the general mass of people, accepting the importance of self-realization, and philosophical search for the absolute truth. All these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever there may be, is ignorance. And if I recall, I think it's right in this third paragraph of 541. Does that look right to you? Yeah, one should try to understand the birth, old age, disease, and death. Or is it false ego? Okay, false ego. False ego means accepting this body as oneself. So that was anahaṁkara. That means absence of false ego. When one understands that he is not his body and his spirit soul, he comes to his real ego. Ego is there. False ego is condemned, but not real ego. In the Vedic literature, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 1.4.10, it is said, ahaṁ brahmāsmi, I am Brahman, I am spirit. This I am, the sense of self, also exists in the liberated stage of self-realization. This sense of I am is ego, but when the sense of I am is applied to this false body, it is false ego. When the sense of self is applied to reality, that is real ego. There are some philosophers who say we should give up our ego, but we cannot give up our ego because ego means identity. We ought, of course, to give up the false identification with the body. Om jnana timirandasya jnanandana shalakaya chakshur unmilitam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we find that when Sanatana Goswami approaches Lord Chaitanya and surrenders as a disciple, that he asks this critical question, which is exactly pertinent to this idea of false ego. Ke ami kene amai tara tapitrai. Who am I? And page 541. Who am I, and why do the threefold miseries give me so much trouble? Why am I suffering? So this who am I question is like critical for making progress in spiritual life. Because the default position that we all grow up with is that we're the body. We are a certain age, we're a certain color, we're a certain nationality, we belong to a certain family. I like to give the example of your driver's license. If you're stopped for speeding or something, license and registration, please. Recently I had to give that out. I'll tell the story later. But what's on that license? First of all, there's your name. There's a picture there. There's, I think your address is on there, is it? In other words, it's your false ego is right there. Because what's the picture of? It's a picture of your body. Your address is the address of the body. So it's all based on what body you happen to be living in. And even in this one body, we find that our sense of self is constantly changing. We can all remember back into our childhood. I don't know how far you can remember. I always like to point out, I remember one thing. The first thing I remember is I was like maybe 4 years old. I was riding a tricycle. I don't know if there was some traumatic experience riding that tricycle, but that's all I remember from that particular year. But I'll tell you, I don't share this with everybody, but my man has mentioned this before. I was critically ill when I was about 5 years old. I had like the measles or something, and I was very rambunctious. I was running around in my bedroom. I wasn't being a good patient. And somehow I came up with some serious disease that I had to go to the hospital. And it turned out it was some kind of encephalitic thing that was moving toward my brain. And my parents, I had my parents and my brother, my older brother, that was my family. They couldn't come to see me in the hospital, but I was on the ground floor, and they could go outside the building and they could look through the window. So I was able to see them once a day. They would wave to me, and I get association. I remember that was important for me. I was 5 years old. And went on, it seemed like a month. I was probably in there for about 4 or 5 days. And I distinctly remember this. They had to give me a shot, in the spinal column. I learned later, much later. And so I was this restless kid, and so they had a nurse sit on me, oh God, and to keep me still so that I could put, that in. My father was freaking out because he thought it was going to affect my brain. So he wanted them, they did it anyway, but he wanted the results right away, the electroencephalograph, to find if there's anything wrong with the brain. And I learned later, he was super relieved there was nothing wrong, And I came out, he gave me a little pistol, cat pistol, and like that. And all that is like engraved in my memory after all these years, 70 years ago. But I got through that crisis and led more or less a normal kid's life after that. But at certain high points, you probably all have something that sticks out, but it's kind of, the rest of it is a blur. You can't remember that much from when you were 5, 6. But clearly we can all know, and our parents will tell us, yes, you were like this, and it was a different body, obviously. It's a different mind. Our mind wasn't developed. We had a certain kid's mentality, whatever it may be. So, but there was no question. I mean, if you're in an ordinary family, maybe you're in a devotee family, that's different. But that's who you identify with. The place where you live, your friends, your parents, especially if you have some siblings, that's all part of the false ego. Because it's all surrounding the body. And the first lesson of the Bhagavad Gita is you're not the body. This little phrase, ahaṁ brahmāsmi, I remember that was one of the first Sanskrit things we learned in the ashram. Prabhu, you're not that body. Ahaṁ brahmāsmi, I'm pure spirit, We're not the supreme Brahman, but we are all Brahman, spirit. So that's, if you read the Bhagavad Gita in the 2nd chapter, that's the first lesson Krishna teaches. Distinguishing the soul, the self, from the body. Because Arjuna was put into illusion by Krishna so the Gita could be spoken. He's an eternal associate of Krishna. But he represents all of us. He was because the other side was filled, first of all, with his beloved grandfather figure, Bhishma Deva, who took the role of the grandfather when his father untimely died, and he and the 5 boys, and Kunti was also protected. And then his teacher, his beloved military teacher, Dronacharya, he was on the other side. And many of the combatants were blood relatives, or they were through marriage. There was a lot of ties, family ties to the other side. So he took one look there and said, I can't fight this battle. If I win the battle, I'll have the kingdom, but it'll be soaked with the blood of my beloved grandfather and teacher and all of these people I love, Better I go to the forest. I just go to the forest. But the problem with that is that right on the chariot is Krishna, who he knows wants him to fight the battle, and that's his duty. So he's torn. He's torn between his higher duty self and serving Krishna, and what's just a wrenching thing of having to kill his beloved friends and relatives like that. This is how the Gita starts. And so, how is he going to resolve that? This also comes up in this list. Right? So on his own he can't. He's paralyzed. He drops his bow and he's crying and he's dysfunctional. Right? That's the scene. Govinda, I shall not fight. Actually, anyway. He speaks. He says, class head drops the bow, and then. But the next thing that happens, if I recall, or maybe it happened before that, is that he changes his tune. He had a whole argument. Remember from the Vedas. I'll kill all these men, their wives will become unprotected, it'll be Varnashakra, I'll be responsible for it, I'll go to hell, and then I'll help them. Right? He had it all figured out on a certain basis. But it was all false, because it was all in the service of his gut reaction. He just didn't want to harm those who he loved. So what is the key turning point there in those first 2 chapters? Where he surrenders to Krishna. As a shishya, as a disciple, not as a friend. Prabhupada explained, the friendly arguments can go on forever, you don't get any conclusion. But no, this is, shishya means, it's from the root, shas, which is the same root of the word, shastra and shastra. And both of those are things that you are controlled by. Shastra voluntarily, and shastra by someone wielding a weapon of some kind. And shishya means someone who takes shelter of a realized, bona fide spiritual master and agrees to be controlled, under control by the instructions. Because you have faith that spiritual master has your best interest at heart. He also has knowledge by which he can enlighten you so that you can also become advanced. So that's the karpan nidosho pata swabhava prichamitvam dharma samudacheta yakshe yaksyanishitam bruhi tanme shishyasteham shadimantam papanam. The key word, papanam, I surrender. So what is he saying there? Karpan, by this miserly weakness that has taken me over me, you know, karpan, apahata swabhava, my swabhava as my nature as a kshatriya has been stolen away by this miserly weakness, by this bewilderment. I'm recognizing that now. Prichami tvam dharma samudacheta. I'm coming to ask you to please instruct me because I'm bewildered about my dharma, my real duty here. This is a key element in the Vedic culture, to do the right thing. What is dharma, and how can I do it? So he's bewildered. Dharma cheta karpam nidosho pahatat svabhava prichami tvam dharma samudacheta yaksheyaksyan nishtitam bruhitanme. Please instruct me how for certain I can achieve my ultimate shreyas, my ultimate good fortune. Yaksheyaksyan nishtitam bruhitanme. Shishyasteham, your shishya now, your disciple. Shishyatam shadimam tvam papanna. Please instruct me, I surrender unto you. So that changes the whole relationship. And then, the next thing Krishna says is, you're full. Ashochan of Ashochas Tram Pragya Bharam Shabhashase. You're lamenting for what is not lamentable, namely the physical body, the demise of the body. Those who are wise don't lament for that, meaning you're not a pundit, you know. So that's a traditional thing the guru does, is that strong words, you know, they try to, you know, get the disciples' attention and really focus them in the right direction. So then the next instruction is, he says, Natvevaham jata nasam natvam neme janadipa nachaiva nabhavishya sarve vayamatakparam. You and I and all of these fighters here, we've existed in the past, we exist now, and we're continuing to exist in the future. In other words, we're all eternal. Nobody's going to die here. A lot of bodies are going to die, but no person, no soul will die. The person is eternal. And then the next key verse, Dehi rosmin yata dehi, that just as we pass through various bodies, childhood, youth, adolescence, you know, prime of life, middle age, old age, and then we get another body at death, after death. We pass it. Tatat dehantara praptir, dhiras tatanamui. Dehantara praptir, you get another body, you achieve another body after death. And those who are dhira, who are self-controlled and wise, they're not disturbed by such a change. You're not a dhira right now, Arjun. You're too disturbed by the prospect of your dear ones, forgive the pun, being killed. So you have to become a dhira. So anyway, it starts like that, and there's 20 verses on the qualities of the soul. The soul cannot be damaged, it cannot be burned, it cannot be, you know, that whole thing, it's eternal. So that's a key basis, because once you understand that, that death is just a change of the body. No one really dies. What is critical is what you do in this life, which will determine your next life, what your destiny will be. Because we're in a human body. But that's not a given. That's a great gift, actually. It's an achievement. In the 11th canto, Krishna is speaking to Uddhava Gita. This is one of the verses there. Is that you have sudurlabham. It's very rare to have a human form. You know, you can see all the millions of insects, and you know they outnumber us by the billions and trillions, and all of them are souls, just as we are. Same kind of, but due to some activity, you know, whatever they did, they got that body, and then they're not sinning. No more sin. They're not responsible. They move up, gradually, come back to the human form. So now we have this opportunity. So this verse is a call to not waste the human form. After many births, you've achieved this manusham, human form. It's the same word. And artadam, it can give you the goal of life. The word that's usually is swarta, swa-arta, the goal of the soul, not just the superficial goals that the body is dictating to us or the mind, but our real goal as souls, which is to break out of the rounds of birth and death, That's one of the verses, the things we said, Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadi Dukkha Doshana Darshanam, to see the evils of birth, old age, death, and disease. So, Manusham Artadam Anityam Apiya Dira, but it's temporary like all bodies. Time is going. Who can deny it? So one has to be Dira. Here's that word Dira again. Self-controlled, sober-minded, considering all of the implications of what we do and what we don't do. And with that consideration, and with the instruction of the Shastra and the bona fide Guru, he says, Turnam Yateta. Don't waste any time. Turnam, immediately start striving for the same word, Nikshayasa, the ultimate good. As long as you haven't died already, because he says, Anumrityu Yavat. The Anumrityu means that the death is with you all the time. It's threatening. In other words, Anu means following, or is it accompanying you? Who can say when we're actually going to leave? So there's no time to waste. Turna means immediately. And yata means strive. For what? Nikshayasa, the ultimate good. Which is breaking the bonds, the knots in the heart, the attachments that keep us coming back and back and back, birth after birth. And well, how do we break those attachments? By turning them into attachment for Krishna. That's the art and science of Bhakti Yoga. Because Krishna is all attractive. So if we chant His name and we serve Him, we see His deity, we associate, we hear, the attachment can be purified. And and if we're successful in one lifetime, we go back to Godhead. Otherwise, we make progress. Nothing is lost. So he says, Nikshayasaya Bishya Kalasarvatak said, you've already experienced all kinds of sense gratifications in all these other bodies. And look what it's gotten you. The present body. You're still not liberated. So forget about that and take up Bhakti Yoga. So that's the Bhagavatam speaking, and Krishna is giving the same message. Here he's outlining 20 different points of knowledge, because without knowledge we're helpless. We're in the Andaya Dandaya Rupaniyamana, that Prahlad Maharaj says that if you shut out all of these invitations to enlightenment, let's say, and you simply focus your mind on the material, then you can't know that your ultimate goal is Vishnu. People who do that, which is the vast majority of people in this age especially, Nate vidu svarta katimi. This is that word svarta again. They don't understand that the real goal of the soul is Vishnu, reawakening a relation with Vishnu, or Krishna, the original Vishnu. Svarta can be Vishnu durashaya bahara, and their minds are absorbed in very difficult to achieve goals in the material world. Ultimately, it's completely self-defeating. Because what you're striving for, of course, is unlimited happiness and to shrink your misery down to zero. But that's impossible in this world, right? On the bodily platform, it's impossible. So it's a durashya, means hope against hope. It's an impossible to achieve goal, but everyone's striving for that. Bahir arta, external goals, the goal of the senses, the mind, the false ego, all of this, not the soul. And in that blindness, you're led by other blind people. Andaya tandaya. Beginning, most often, with ordinary parents who don't know anything about Krishna. They're the first teachers of the child, obviously. So you get misled, then you get your regular teachers, and on and on and on. Then you Fox News, and you're finished. But a lot of people, that's their God, that's their guru, isn't it? Imagine how unfortunate that is. So andaya tandaya means the blind leading the blind, and everyone remains bound up by the three modes of nature. So this is Prahlad Maharaj's assessment of his father, Hiranyakashipu. He was explaining to him why. The previous verse says, don't worry, father, you'll never become Krishna conscious. Matirna Krishna Padadagsvatoba. For someone who is immersed in materialistic life and has kind of taken a vow of that, then no amount of implications to join Krishna consciousness are going to help. His father was not going to chant Hare Krishna. So what's the solution? Third verse in this series, very important. Naisha matistavarukramaṅgriṅ spishityanarta pagamo hirarta mahiyasam padarabhishekam nishkinyananam navanita yavat. That's in this series of elements of knowledge. Acharyopasanam, to worship a genuine spiritual master. So this worship is described one cannot think of Krishna's lotus feet, which is the universal panacea for everything. Naishamatis tavat urukramanging spishati. You can't touch those lotus feet with your mind. And then this great phrase, the Sanskrit language, anato bhagamo yararta. You cannot achieve the goal of getting rid of the arta of getting rid of all your unartas. You see what I'm saying? Anato bhagamo yararta. Until mahiyasham padarajobhishekam, you take a bath in the foot dust of the realized soul, means that you surrender, like Sanatana Goswami. Now, back to Sanatana Goswami, he was had such a position in society. He was the prime minister of the king. His brother was the finance minister. That's how much they were trusted. They were from the Saraswata Brahman family. They had been coerced into serving in the government. This is what doesn't come out so often. That the king there, Nawab Hussain Shah, was threatening to persecute the devotees and the Brahmins unless they served in the government, because he saw their quality. They were so intelligent and competent and everything. So they did that, and they lost their status because they were serving in the government. But then when Lord Chaitanya came, they, took shelter of him. The famous verse, this is where that famous verse was spoken. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Badayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namani Goda Tajay Namaha. I offer my obeisance to the most munificent avatar. I just want to, there's one little editorial concern, because I always deal with these words. Prabhupada would often use the word munificent and magnanimous synonymously. He would often thought you the most magnanimous. Now there's a difference in emphasis. Magnanimous stresses forgiving. It stresses that one is very noble-minded and is ready to tolerate so many things and like that. It doesn't stress giving. Munificent means giving. So Lord Chaitanya was both forgiving and giving. He was the greatest, giving the greatest gift, pure love of God. By the easy process of Sankirtan. But he was also forgiving, and the greatest act of forgiveness, you could say, would probably be Jagai Madai. On the Nityananda's request, he forgave them for attacking him physically and all of the other things that they've done. And instead of cutting off their heads with his chakra, which he was wielding, he embraced Jagai, gave him pure love of God, and then Madai said, this is a good deal. I'm going to try to get this also. But Lord just said, no, I can't give you that. You have to get from Nityananda. You have to get his forgiveness, which of course he got, and they both turned into great devotees. So they're kind of the archetype of going from the worst Kali Yuga personalities, very disruptive in society, criminals, to being purified by the association of Lord Chaitanya. So surrender is a tough word, but that's what it takes, because right now we're surrendered. We're serving. We're serving our lust, greed, anger, three modes of nature, all kinds of things. Our misconceptions. You have to serve. That's the nature. There's a wonderful verse. You've heard this one many times. But it's also in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya to Sanatana Goswami. When he's teaching, it's the most extensive instructions in the Chaitanya Charitamrita is given to Sanatana Goswami. So it's divided into three sections. It's technical terms, and you may forget those, but the concept is important. Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojana. So Sambandha is a lot of what we get in the Bhagavad Gita in the early chapters, and that is this idea of who am I, who is God, what is this world, and what are the relationships? Sambandha means relationship. Now it has a more esoteric meaning. Ultimately, Sambandha means your personal relationship with Krishna, what our form is in the spiritual world. That's also Sambandha, but that's in a later time. So the Sambandha is there, and but when he starts speaking of the process, the next thing is Abhideya, means the practice by which you can realize that. Prayojana is the ultimate goal. So the Sambandha is all of this detail. What is this world? What is the energies of Krishna? Understanding that, and how Krishna creates the world. Where do we fit in? What's our real nature? All of that is Sambandha, very important foundation. But how am I going to realize this? I may know the words and the concepts intellectually, but how do I realize it? That's the practice. Hare Krishna, chanting Hare Krishna, and the 9 practices of devotional service. So he's beginning his talk on Abhideya, 1 or 2 chapters in there in the Madhya Lila. And right at the beginning he gives this verse. And this verse, we're not sure who wrote it. There's some indication Madhavendra Puri wrote it, but it's included there in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So it goes, Kamadinam katina katita parita durni deshas. Tesham jata maina karuna nattapa no upashanti. Utsrijayata nati yadupate sampratam labna buddhis. Tvamayata kshadanamabhayam mam niyungsvat nadasye. So this is a poem uttered by the devotee to Krishna. So I put in a poem. In how many ways have I sought to obey the seductive demands of my wicked desires? They've shown me no mercy, yet on I've gone shamelessly trying to quench lust's unquenchable fires. But now I'm rejecting these hellish desires, for my higher intelligence now has awoken. O Krishna, O shelter of fearlessness, please let me serve you with faith that will never be broken. So there's so much in this verse. First of all, the kama adina means lust, etc. It all begins with material desire. You know, lust, anger, greed, illusion. There's a progression. In the 2nd chapter, Krishna gives 2 verses that describe how the soul becomes degraded. Dhyayato vishayan pungsa, sangas te shupajayate. Sangat sanjayate kama, kamat krodho vijayate, krodat bhavati sammoha, sammohat smriti vibhrama, smriti brangshat buddhinasho buddhinasha panashyati. Very, very cogent. So he says it begins with meditating, absorbing oneself in the objects of the senses with the idea of enjoying. Dhyayato vishayan. Vishayan is the object of senses. I always point out that Sanskrit is such a wonderful language. You know the word for poison in Sanskrit? One of the words is visha. And the word for object of the senses is sense gratification, vishayan. Poison for the soul. So, dhyayato is become absorbed. I always like to point out, this is what the advertising industry is all about. To get your attention so that you'll meditate or you'll get absorbed even for a few seconds on what they're trying to sell you. They try to say, well, this is how you can enjoy. We can meet this need that you have, right? And if they get you, then you want to get it. You buy it and experience it. So this is the whole material world is like that. And so by meditating on the object senses, becoming absorbed, an attachment for them develops. Sangha. Sangat, if you pursue it and you continue meditating and hoping and thinking and reading and hearing your friends how much they enjoyed it, then you really want to enjoy it. So sangat sanjayate kama. Now that line is often pulled out to indicate, because sangha can mean association as well as attachment. So as you associate, you develop your desires. That's why every parent knows, they want to know who their kid's hanging out with, right? Or these days, what sites are you visiting? You know? That's sangha. Sangha is whatever your senses contact that affects you, that develops your attachment. So sangat sanjayate kama, that develops a strong desire, and eventually those strong desires, you try to fulfill them, but you're frustrated and become angry. Kama krodho bhajayate. And when it gets into anger, sammoha, you become completely bewildered. You can do something that you would never ordinarily do, and it can affect your rest of the life. Prabhupada tells the story on one tape on his lecture, how he knew of a case where one brother killed another brother. And the first brother was arrested, he was sentenced to be executed, and the father appealed to the judge, I've already lost one brother, now this son, now this other son is still to be have some mercy. So they commuted it to life in prison, you know. So, but you know, so krodha can completely affect your intelligence. Sammoha smriti, you forget your remembrance, you forget who you are, what you are. Smriti brangshad, and that buddhi nasha, your intelligence is destroyed. You fall down again. You're finished. So it all begins with contemplating the objects of the senses. So instead of contemplating those objects of the senses, if we contemplate Krishna, right, we'll become attracted to Krishna, because he's all attractive. That's the whole science. And that protects you. That protects you from material attraction. to the point where Yamunacharya writes this verse, because he had been a wonderful student and an ashram, wonderful devotee growing up. Then he had a debate, you know the story, with the king's minister. He won that debate, and the king had promised half the kingdom, so suddenly he's a king. So he gets into the king mood, and he gets a little away from his sadhana. But one of his old buddies comes and visits him at the palace. You know the story? And he says, "Oh, nice to see you again. Yeah, let's take a walk." So he starts walking, and he starts sharing various shlokas and things. And Yamuna is waking. "Oh yeah, I remember that one." And he just keeps walking. He leaves the kingdom, right? Renounces, takes sannyas, and he becomes Yamunacharya. And he wrote this verse and many others. Yadavadi mamacheta Krishna pada davinde navanasa rantamat navanasa Yadavadi mamacheta Krishna pada davinde navanasa rantam asi bhavati mukhavakara sushtanishti vanangsha. Can't believe I forgot the verse. Do you know it?
I remember the translation.
Okay, let's hear the stress. I'll repeat it for the. How?
Whenever I contemplate about the sense gratification, my lips curl out of distress.
Yeah. But the first part is, ever since I've been enjoying, moment to moment, the rasa, the pleasure of serving Krishna's lotus feet. Now, at that point, whenever these memories bubble up, from my times when I had my harem or something, he says, his lips curl in the states and he spits at the thought. Prabhupada very endearingly he says, "I spite on it." That was very I spite on it. So, but just think of the mentality there, the fact that the very idea of sense gratification is just abominable to you, because you're actually moment to moment enjoying the rasa, the pleasure of serving Krishna. It's not dependent on your age, it's not dependent on your gender or anything, It's dependent on your consciousness. And so that is the protection. That's where all of this Bhagavad Gita is leading, and the Bhagavatam, is to bring us to the point of accepting the sadhana, and it's a practice of systematically transferring our attachment from the material to the spiritual. There's this one very nice verse that was taught to me by, I don't think anyone here has ever met him, but Mahavishnu Maharaj the Elder. Did you know him? He started a temple in Dwarka. He used to spend a lot of time here before he was a sannyasi. He was a disciple of Shivaram Swami. And then, wonderful devotee, he was with Prabhupada. I think he saw Prabhupada on that Rath Yatra in 1972 in England, because he's from Britain. And Prabhupada was supposedly ill and everything, but he got so inspired he started dancing the whole way. He didn't even ride on the cart. And he inspired so many devotees like that. So anyway, he... what was I going to say about him?
He taught you a verse.
Oh yes, thank you. So before he was a sannyasi, he was a brahmachari, because he's a disciple of Shivaram Swami, And we were in Vrindavan together, waiting online for prasadam. And I would do this a lot, and I still do it these days. I asked, "Would you like to hear a nice verse?" Bhakta Ross is learning shlokas now. He already knows Dehino Sminyata, Dehi Ishvara Parama Krishna, and many, many others, right? About 5 others. Anyway, but he's learning. So I asked Maharaj, "Would you like to hear a nice shloka?" He said, "Yes." And he pulls out a little pad. No one ever done this before. He's taking notes, So I can't recall which verse I told him. Probably something from the Karnamrita, But he told me a verse, which he then wrote down, and I learned word by word. So this is a very nice verse. I put it into a poem. De heshti mangsurudide bimatam chijasva. Jaya sutadi jasadama matam vimuncha. Pushyani sham jagaditam chanabongatishtam. Vairagya raga rasiko bhava bhakti nishtam. Don't love the body, just a bag of flesh and blood and bone. Give up your sense of ownership for all you think you own. At every moment, see that your world totters on destruction. Become detached and learn to love the Lord without obstruction. Now, I like to point out that I didn't really do justice to that last line, because there's this wonderful phrase in the Sanskrit, Vairagya raga, rasiko bhava bhakti nishtam. Get attached to detachment. Vairagya, raga. Vairagya means detachment from the material, and raga means attachment in general. But the only way to do that is to become a rasika, is to become skilled at tasting at every moment the pleasure of Krishna consciousness, which we all tasted. We've all tasted, otherwise we wouldn't be here, even if it's just a little bit, right? Kirtans, some nice festival, whatever it is, you know. So here he's enjoining us, you know, these different lines. Don't, you know, strong word. Don't be attracted to the body. It's ultimately just a, you know, machine, bag. But use the body, the senses, for the soul to become attracted to Krishna. And that's the central point of what's being taught here. Boy, I really got carried away. So, where were we in the purport here? False ego. Yeah. So we should go on, right? Birth, death, old age, and disease we haven't done. That's right. 541, third paragraph. Did we do birth, death, old age, and disease? One should try to understand the distress of accepting birth, death, old age, and disease. There are descriptions in various Vedic literatures of birth. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the world of the unborn, the child's stay in the womb of the mother, is suffering, etc., are all very graphically described. It should be thoroughly understood that birth is distressful. Because we forget how much distress we have suffered within the womb of the mother, we do not make any solution to the repetition of birth and death. Similarly, at the time of death, there are all kinds of sufferings, and they are also mentioned in the authoritative scriptures. These should be discussed. And as far as disease and old age are concerned, everyone gets practical experience. No one wants to be diseased, and no one wants to become old, but there is no avoiding these. Unless we have a pessimistic view of this material life, considering the distresses of birth, death, old age, and disease, there is no impetus for our making advancement in spiritual life. So this is an important point, because ultimately we're not supposed to worry about birth and death. You know, the verse by Lord Chaitanya, Nadanam Jananam Sundari, he's teaching us how to pray. He said, you chant Hare Krishna, but don't transfer, you know, any prayer for anything like this. Wealth, followers, wealth and women, followers, the fruits of mundane piety, liberation from this world of limitless anxiety. Now, how do we know that? Because it's Mama Janmani Janmani. He said, birth after birth. Here's what I want. I don't want anything material. I simply want unmotivated devotional service to you. I want pure devotion. There's a motivation, but the word ahoitiki means material motivation. The motivation is simple. The motivation is how to please Krishna. Because we find that is the most pleasing thing that we can do. It's counterintuitive, because our intuition is all on the material platform. But if we forget about our own pleasure and just think of Krishna's pleasure, and how can we serve serve the devotees, and how can we spread Krishna consciousness and give it to others, and then you find yourself in bliss. Because that's the nature of it. Because Krishna is able to unlimitedly enjoy, anandamaya abhyasan. You see, we're part and parcel of Krishna. So if we participate in Krishna's enjoyment, then we also get to be able to enjoy on that unlimited platform. We're only taking pleasure in Krishna's pleasure, but his ability to enjoy is unlimited. So if we're participating in that, then we're on the transcendental platform. And that's actually, what is that? Here's a phrase that I don't think anyone knows. It's in the second canto, it's in the purport to akama sarva kamo va moksha kamo dadadi. Those who are familiar with the verse, a famous verse. And Prabhupada is talking about desirelessness. Akama means no lusty desires. If you don't have any, if you're free of desires, or you have all kinds of desires, or you want liberation, if you're intelligent, you'll worship Krishna with great intensity. Tivrena bhakti yogena. So in that purport, there's a phrase quoted from one of Jiva Goswami's Sandarbhas, Prabhupada doesn't say which one, which encapsulates the essence of bhakti yoga. And what it says is, I memorized this when I first read it many, many years ago. Bhajaniya padama purusha sukha matra swasukatvam, which means, word by word, Bhajaniya, the worshipable Supreme Lord. Bhajaniya Padama Purusha, Supreme Person. Bhajaniya Padama Purusha Sukha Matra, only the happiness of that Supreme Person. Only in the happiness of the Supreme Person, Krishna, should one take one's own happiness. Swa Sukhatvam. You see? It's a very simple Sanskrit. But that's the essence of the whole thing. If we can, by meditating on Krishna and his pastimes and so forth, we can develop attraction for Krishna, affection for Krishna, love for Krishna. Then just like a mother takes pleasure in the happiness of the child, that's the highest pleasure. The mother sees the child growing nicely, happy, dancing, singing, eating, then she's fulfilled. Right, in pure. That's as close as we can get in the material pleasure. Right? But the spiritual side can expand unlimitedly and continue forever, because it's on spirit. It doesn't die. So that's the all of it we're listening to. But the interesting thing here is that he's saying that without understanding birth, old age, disease, and death, there's no impetus for devotions. For starting. He says it makes no sense to invest all your time and energy and attention and money in building up something on the material side, because it's all doomed. It's all going to be taken away. Who can deny it? By time, by death, mrityu sarvaharascha. So, understanding birth, old age, disease, and death, because if we don't go back to God and we don't make any progress, then we're going to go round and round and around as we've already been going. And Krishna, yes, he lets us forget what it was like in the womb. He lets us forget what the last death was and all the diseases and everything. And much of material life is trying to forget that, right? You know, you're 70 years old, you know, and you're still trying to enjoy, you know, the senses and pathetically, you know, and they're ready to take all your money to try to help you. 85, yeah. I know, it's tragic, you know, that without spiritual knowledge, you waste the precious moments of your life trying to squeeze out some pleasure. And I'm telling you, my months, I spent about a year in the hospital working. This is not as a patient, but as a not a nurse, but an inhalation therapist. I had a job. This was when I was 24 or 5. I'm sorry, inhalation therapy. Yeah. And so I saw a lot of people suffering. I saw a lot of people die, and you know, at the same time, after a while, I was also reading Bhagavad Gita, so the whole thing was playing out in front of me, you know. So, and I realized, yes, this is the real problem. You know, people would come in there, they were wealthy, or they were poor, or old, young, and whatever it was. You know, they were shocked that their plans for enjoyment were now, you know, being endangered tremendously. So that's what material life is. It's a hopeless concern. It's a huge con. You know, the big lie. Everyone knows what the big lie is, right? So there's many big lies, but the biggest lie is that you are your body. That's the biggest lie underlying the whole thing. It's Maya's trick. To you know, her job, thankless task, is to give us ways to forget Krishna. But if we surrender to Krishna, then that very same Maya, the energy and stuff, can be directed to Krishna. What is that? I'll end on this one verse. It's time for it. 87th chapter, 10th canto. This is the prayers of personified Vedas. Very instructive. This one is amazing. Tvarandupratam kurdaim inamapma surit priyavat. Chadatiktaton muketu hi te piya atmanicha. Nabadadamandaho asadupasanaya mahano yadonashaya brahme udubaye kushariri batak. So the prayer is, my dear Lord, this is one of the personified Vedas praying to the Lord. The human form of life is very suitable for serving you. Inam atmasurit priyavat. And when one is fully engaged in serving you, the body becomes his best friend and very dear, because it's like paraphernalia for service. You see? And on your side, as the super soul, you're guiding from within. And so everything is very auspicious. But alas, it says, Nabatadamantaho, those who don't take their pleasure in serving you, they worship the impermanent, worshiping mammon, like in the Bible. Asadupasana. Atmahano, which is virtual suicide for the soul, spiritual suicide, you know. You don't really die, but it's Atmahano. And what's the result? Yadanushaya brahme. Then they have to wander in many different bodies and worse than human bodies, lower bodies, which give great fear as you're trying to fulfill these unfulfillable desires. So this is and the commentary is wonderful. It's by my old godbrother, Gopi Puranadana Prabhu. He translated many things. So this is the choice we have. Are we going to pursue this fool's errand of trying to squeeze out sensual pleasure from this body or mental pleasure? Or can we find a guide, a bona fide spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada is here through his books, and take up Krishna consciousness seriously and make progress toward liberation, going back home, back to Godhead. So I'm sorry, I'm haranguing. There's a ring.